green? Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go!
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go! And a good morning, Birds fans. Cut down day. Kind of a tough day for a bunch of players in the National Football League, but it's also a day for Eagle fans to get excited. You get excited about cut down? I don't know. Maybe not.
That's exciting, I think. You know, it's a big day, but it's only the initial 53. Like the real 53, I saw somebody tweeted in these rights, I forget, but the real 53 is next Tuesday before Wednesday practice because you have all this time now. NFL changed a couple years ago. They sort of had that extra span before the final, not the final, the initial cut down, and have that, you know, the players collectively bargain, have the weekend off. So then they come back next week, and that's when, you know, you're going to see waiver pickups, you're going to see trades, you're going to see moves. And, you know, go back to last year. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. The Eagles, well, they claimed Trey Sermon and Ian Book. So, you know, that's after the 53. And I think that Jack Anderson got claimed by the Giants. Josh Blackwell got claimed by the Bears. I think there was a third one, but I can't remember. Josh Blackwell. Boy, I hate to pick on the Bears, but he's still on the Bears, by the way. It's not
Is
that.
he still on their roster?
But if you remember the great Ugo Amadi era, the Eagles traded for Ugo Amadi. He was at practice in Cleveland. They had joint practices. Then he flew to Florida, and then they traded him to Tennessee. He was there that quick. They traded for him. They traded him out. But when they traded for him originally, they had to get a roster spot. And to do that, they waived Josh Blackwell. And this is like, Jody, this is like a week before the final cut. So I'm saying to myself, and I know it seems like I pick on the Bears, but I don't pick on the Bears. It's just easy because they make so many mistakes. So I'm thinking to myself, well, if you like the kid, why didn't you pick him up the week earlier when they waived him? The Eagles waived him and brought him back. They waived him when they traded for Amadi. Then when they traded Amadi, they brought him back. And I'm like, well, if you like the kid that much, you could have had an extra week.
Maybe they had an injury in between. Do you remember all the roster moves?
No, I don't.
Made?
There could always be other things, but it's like it's just an example. But because I bring up Josh Blackwell, and by the way, he's still on the team. I do not believe he's been cut by the Bears. So.
Well, then that was a good pickup if they got a full year out of him and he's going to make the roster again. I would say that's a smart move by the Chicago.
If you get an extra week, that's my only point. If you got your eye on the kid, yeah. But anyway, I don't know if he's going to make the team. I said I I don't think he's been released yet, is what I.
Right. He will be one of, if he's cut, many players that are cut today. The NFL will add to the unemployment issues in this country. And then a whole bunch of guys will get jobs back. I'm going to go through the dates and times and everything on the practice squad because it is an important part of doing business in the National Football League. It's a 53-man roster, but in actuality, it's a 69-man roster because you do have the ability to bring players back on the practice squad as well, which is a scramble. It's kind of like the hour. No, I can't even. The minute after the NFL draft ends and people start scrambling for the undrafted free agents, and are you going to make a specific bid to get to a guy? There's some recruitment involved, and there's recruitment involved with the practice squad as well. But before we ever get to the cuts, Johnny Mac, Eagles added a player yesterday. While everyone else is lopping players off or getting ready to lop players off, and the Eagles already lopped off 20 guys, so that they only have to cut 17 before today's deadline. They actually added a player, and the headline kind of writes itself. Eagles gamble on Isaiah.
Yeah, that was low. That was low hanging fruit, Jody. And believe me, I went there 10 seconds after.
You and every other writer who covers the Philadelphia Eagles, it's just too good not to use. Hey, it's Howie Roseman being Howie Roseman when you can pick up a talented player with no really strings attached. They don't have to put him on the roster. He's already suspended, reserved. So he's just kind of sitting in abeyance for an entire year. And oh, by the way, I say an entire year. He needs to petition the league for reinstatement. It's, I think, a given that he's going to be reinstated next year.
Unless he keeps gambling in the meantime, which I hope he learned his lesson. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt he's going to be back as long as he doesn't do that. But yeah, I mean, this is where I give the Eagles credit, man. I think a lot of other organizations, the vast majority of other organizations, good and bad ones, so I'm not going to pick on the Bears here, good and bad ones, don't even think about crap like this. And the Eagles do. So I give them credit. I mean, that's a good football player. And, you know, they don't have to pay him. He can't be with the team. The contract tolls. It's just one of those innovative ideas. You sign him now, it tolls because he's suspended, so it turns into a 2024 contract. And you don't have to deal with when teams wake up and they say, oh, Rodgers has been reinstated. We need a corner. Let's try to go after him. You don't have to deal with it. You beat him. You're ahead of the curve. You know, they deserve a ton of credit for this stuff. This is the kind of outside the margin stuff that we always talk about with this team. They're just better than other teams, the vast majority, when it comes to stuff like this.
And he's only 25 years old. And last year, you and I both have kind of a love-hate relationship with PFF, Pro Football Focus. Some of the things they do, I think, are tremendous. Other things make me roll my eyes. And I know you're breaking down film, but I watch film too, and I just don't see it the same way you do. So I don't use it as gospel, but it's pretty darn good. And they do put the work in and the effort in. They had him graded as the 5th best cornerback in the National Football League. How has he been sitting out here all the time? We're giving the Eagles credit for taking a gamble. Sorry, I couldn't resist on this young man, but so could everybody else.
Honestly, Jody, I think they don't even think about it. They're like, he's suspended. Well, you know, it's not. They don't even think about stuff like that. They don't even think about, oh, we can sign him and the contract will toll and we can get. They don't even think about that. I mean, that's what it comes down to, and. Yeah, I mean, the Eagles deserve a lot of credit. This is a good player. Now, he's not the 5th best cornerback in football, and I'm with you. I like Pro Football Focus. I always explain if you understand the context of what they do, and you know he played. I'm trying to look it up as we speak. So if you look at the top 5 cornerbacks, you know, he played 400 and something reps. So the sample size is a lot smaller than if you're. So Sauce Gardner was number one, your guy. He played 1,114.
Right.
Number two was Pat Surtain, who played 1,104. Ramsey was third, who played 1078. And then you had Duke Shelley, who played 470, and Rogers that played 434. Then you go to Ward, who's 1,144, Campbell, who's 1,275. So those were really fourth and fifth, Ward and Campbell. But, they played well, Duke Shelley and Isaiah Rogers, in a limited role. That's what it means. They played well. They did a good job in their limited roles. And, it's interesting. He played a lot outside Rogers with the Colts. I guess they had some injury issues. And to me, obviously, just from his size alone, he's 5'10", 170 pounds. He should be a slot corner. Ultimately, that's where I think the Eagles will be looking at him. But we'll see. We got a long time to wait. But I don't see any downside to this.
And if he had played 80 snaps, then I would have said a limited role. He's played 1/3 of what a usual on the field, every single play cornerback would play. If he's playing 400, the other guys are playing 1,000, 1,100. It's a smaller sample size, but I wouldn't even call it a
Blankenship sample size. It's basically the same thing. It's a Reed played in that area. It's not, when you're Sauce Gardner or Patrick Surtain, there is difference. The more you're on the field and the more people notice you're on the field, if there's some issues, they're going to try to take advantage of it. So I do think sample size matters. That's a significant, that's not a lot. It's not small. I agree with that, but it's not a lot. So, I don't see any downside to it.
Here's the only downside, John, and you kind of referenced it in passing. Is he still got a problem? Because you and I have talked plenty here on the show about the way the NFL has dealt with players and this gambling issue, that you think they should have had more of a build up to a significant suspension or fine, that you get your wrist slapped first, and then if you do it again, then the fine gets, and then if you do it again, all right, now you're sitting for an entire year. And you might be right about that. From what I was told, and you've got better sources than I do, but I have a couple of sources. This was pretty well, certain teams, they left it up to individual teams to make sure that the players understood all the possibilities of what could happen to them if they broke the rules, what the rules were, what the potential punishments were. So there could have been guys who slept through. Maybe the Indianapolis Colts are just a poorly run organization that didn't get the information that they got. Everybody knew. If I knew, and I'm just a stupid guy who hosts a show on either YouTube or the radio, I knew that you can't bet on National Football League games. Well, and a player in the National Football League's got to know that. If you get caught for I made the bet in the parking lot of the facility and I didn't realize it was a geo tracker, and that I can just kind of forgive and go, all right, well, he didn't understand all the rules. This guy bet hard-earned money on an actual national football.
He bet on his own team. He bet on the Colts. Yeah, I'm not when I said that what I said, which you described accurately, I'm talking about guys who are betting on NBA games.
Right.
And, from the start, I said, yeah, if you bet on an NFL game, you got to be suspended.
Down, and it came down on this guy. He got an entire year. That scares me a little bit. If a guy's got a 2-team NBA,
but why it doesn't scare me is, all right, doesn't matter. Then they don't have them. But so from that standpoint, again, we'll use the low hanging fruit again. It's a gamble, but I don't think the Eagles are going to count on him and say, "Oh, we're going to build. He's going to be our slot corner. We're going to build anything around him." I think they're smart enough. They've proven they're smart enough to sign this contract in the first place. They're smart enough to realize, they're not going to put their apples in the Isaiah Rogers basket. It's just an opportunity to potentially get a talented player for virtually nothing. I'm sure when the contract comes out, it'll be the veteran minimum or wherever he is in his career. So, yeah, I don't see any downside. If he gets suspended again, he gets suspended again, and you kick him out and you move on. He probably never sets foot in the building.
Right. But here's where you could have an issue, and I know this is hypothetical and it's reaching a little bit. 367 days from now, the Eagles have cut down their roster. They've still got Isaiah Rodgers on there. He's got a spot. He's got a role on the team, and he says, "Damn, I never knew how good AJ Brown was. I'm going to bet he gets over 1,400 yards this year because he's my teammate, and I see him every day in practice, and he's the only one who's beating me. So let me make some coin on the side." And then he does that and gets suspended again. Yeah, that's an issue. I know that's a taking it several steps down the road issue, but if a guy is going to be foolish enough to bet on a teammate in Indianapolis, he might do the same here in Philadelphia.
Well, he might. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I look at what if the Eagles go into next year and say Isaiah Rodgers, and we're here at this time next year, he's going to be the starting slot corner. And yeah, and he gets suspended. Obviously, that would become an issue. I don't think that's going to be. I think they see, hey, it's pretty good depth. Let's go get this kid. He can return kicks as well, so you might have a little versatility. Again, I don't think they're going into this saying, "Oh, this is a foundational piece that we're counting on."
Right. No,
so from that standpoint, I'm like, I think other teams don't even think the way the Eagles do. Like they're like, "Oh, he's suspended. Well, if he gets reinstated, we'll say, oh, we need a slot quarterback." That's the way other teams approach things. The Eagles are like, hey, we could sign him now, toll his contract, and we already got him, and we don't have to deal with these teams, because when he did get reinstated next year, a bunch of teams would have been snipping around him because everybody needs corners. Now you don't have to deal with it. So I don't see much downside at all.
As you accurately described it, John, Eagles winning in the margins, and Howie Roseman is very good at that. All right, he's McMullen on McDonald's. It's cut down day in the NFL. John and I will kick it around, and we've got two good guests to join us to help in the conversation. First up is longtime Eagles reporter, the creator and lead writer for Eagles Blitz, IGGLES Blitz.com. Tommy Lawlor is going to jump in with us here next on Birds 365.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
EAGLES, Eagles.
You got Mac here with you on Birds 365. John McMullen, Jody McDonald. We're lucky enough to have Tommy Lawlor from EaglesBlitz.com jumping aboard with us. Tommy, before we talk about this year's team, you covered the team for a bunch of years. You got a good cut down day story? Anybody who didn't know was coming, maybe lost their mind, screaming and yelling or making a scene or anything like that, or a defeated guy walking out of the locker room after seeing the Turk? You remember when I used to call him the Turk? You had to go visit the Turk, and the coach would tell you, bring your playbook with you. Now you got
playbook. Bring your iPad.
Bring your tablet with you. Yeah. Things have changed over the years. But
I'm sorry. Microsoft Surface. I have to pay homage to the NFL.
The best story for me might be when it involved an Eagles cut in back in 1998. Tampa Bay drafted, spent a 6th-round pick on a cornerback named Al Harris, and they cut him the cut down day. He comes to Philadelphia a couple of days later and starts the season opener and became a fixture corner for the Eagles for the next 5 years. But it was funny that this guy who literally Eagles picked up off the street a couple of days later was a starting corner for that 1998 team. And the season opener, they lost to Seattle 38-0. So even though he played well, it didn't do much help. But it was funny to me, the thought of a guy getting the axe in one place and then saying, hey, you're on the field 5 days later as a starter. Yeah. So,
I mean, it's interesting, Tommy, because you bring up Al Harris. Back in the day, well, the draft used to be 12 rounds. Then I think they cut it to 8 and then finally 7, if I'm remembering correctly. But even when they made that shift, early in the process, you used to see like 7th-round guys, 6th-round guys get cut all the time. And they still, still certain guys. Cleveland cut a 4th-round kicker. So there's certain guys who perform so poorly they do go. But man, teams hold on to their draft picks like it's unbelievable now. They don't want to cut draft picks.
Have you ever heard of Johnny Unitas? Does that name ring a bell? He was a Pittsburgh Steeler, and they cut him.
Yeah,
they cut him. The Colts got this guy off the street.
Yeah,
one of the great quarterbacks.
Well, I always I got to cover. I always talk about John Randall because I got to cover him early in my career. He's in the Hall of Fame. He wasn't drafted when it was 12 rounds. I mean, 12 rounds. People said, no, thanks, no thanks, no thanks, again and again and again and again, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys and. Chris Carter in the supplemental draft for the Eagles is another example, different because it's supplemental. But I do think, sometimes people need a second chance because, Chris was very honest later in his career. Buddy Ryan was protecting him because he had a significant drug problem and he didn't want to say that publicly. And, it was sort of an attempt to, give him a second chance. And he had the wake-up call, and he took advantage, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So there's always interesting stories like that behind the scenes, but some guys need a change of scenery. That's just part of it.
See, over the years, you see how important fit is. And
yeah.
A good example, Darwin Walker. I feel like he was maybe a 3rd-round pick by the Cardinals. Gets cut before his first season. Yeah. And the Eagles picked him up. He sat out the entire, I guess that was 2001 season, and it is a starting defensive tackle in 2002, and had like 7.5 sacks.
Yeah.
So once Jim Johnson got him, put him in the right system, and he had the right people around him, he excelled and was a starting defensive tackle for the next 5-6 years.
Yeah,
But
I think
he wasn't good enough to make the Cardinals team.
You're 100% fit is one of the most underrated things, and I think too many fans assume a vacuum in that if so and so insert name is a good player, they would have been a good player here, or they'd be good, and that's not always the case. Andy Reid and quarterbacks, man. I always go back to '99 and say, what if Tim Couch was with Andy Reid and Donovan McNabb had to go to Cleveland? How does if there's a parallel universe somewhere where that happened, I'd be interested to see how things would work out. Fit matters a lot. It really does.
All right, so let me ask you, Tommy, and John, jump in if you want about a fit question. Where does Derek Barnett fit in the NFL this year? Is it going to be here in Philadelphia? He got permission to go out and seek a trade with another team. Is there a fit anywhere for Derek Barnett?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a veteran pass rusher who's a great effort player. I mean, every coach he has loves him because the dude plays hard, he practices hard, he gives you everything, and coaches are always going to respect that and like that. They get frustrated with the penalties, obviously. Nobody could help that.
It's always him, Tommy.
Yeah, exactly, right? But the guy he's somebody that you need in the NFL as a backup pass rusher. And I was looking around depth charts last night trying to find a good fit, and there was nobody that came to mind because I'm just not sure about some of these other teams and how some of these guys have performed in the summer and just how comfortable they are with their players. I know Jim Schwartz, in theory, would love to have him, but Cleveland looks to have a decent set of defensive ends.
Yeah, Cleveland's good. How about Chicago, Minnesota, NFC North? They need pass rushers.
Those are possibilities. There's a few teams out there that could look at him and see if what you got to find is a team that feels like they're a contender and thinks that they need another pass rusher to help them win games. So obviously, because like you could say Jonathan Gannon could use him in the Cardinals because God knows that roster needs help, but obviously they're not trying to contend; they're trying to do the very opposite. So they're not going to take on a veteran. They're not going to have interest in a guy like him. So it'll be interesting to see if they can pull something off. I'd love to see it happen because it would open up a roster spot for a younger player like Janarius Robinson or somebody that you could keep and try to develop for the future. Barnett is what he is, and he's a solid player. But the Eagles with Sweat and Reddick and then Nolan Smith and then a guy named Brandon Graham, those are your top 4 edge rushers. Barnett's not beating those guys out unless there's an injury.
Yeah, I was always of the thought, guys, that that was like off-season talk. And I always talked about it with Jody. It's like a great insurance policy. But the guy's 27 years old. At the end of the day, he wants to earn another contract somewhere else, and you need playing time for that. He was never going to be happy being the 5th edge rusher. So from the Eagles' perspective, they don't want to give him up. They don't want to cut him. They don't want to get nothing for him. But you can't just sit a guy like that as your 5th edge rusher. Now, the curveball, though, Nolan Smith, he's missed 5 straight practices now. And he kind of let out that out of nowhere, like, hey, this shoulder's been an issue for me, and it's going to be an issue for me. I mean, I don't know when he's coming back, but I'm starting to get concerned about Nolan Smith's shoulder. So maybe the Eagles might want to pause and say, hey, maybe he is going to be the 4th edge rusher, at least early in the season.
Possibility. Absolutely. And that's why if you have a good player in your roster, you don't just give those guys away, and Barnett, we can debate, just how good he is and this and that, but again, he's a proven player who, can be effective. I mean, he helped a team win the Super Bowl as a backup right defensive end. So he has his place on the field, but he's just not a guy that you can plug in as a starter. He's not a difference maker, but he can be a good role player.
All right. Let's narrow focus here and let's deal with some facts. The Super Bowl is now a long time ago. It's 5 years. You realize how long 5 years in the National Football League is. It's a lifetime. So it's a long time ago when he made a big play in a big game for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Brandon made the big play, but He was
he
in the
fell
right
on the
spot.
football, yes, and he made a big play the week before against Minnesota. That was 2017. It's now soon to be 2023. Okay, so let's keep his actual big play production in the proper perspective. And for those who were reporting yesterday, Eagles could try and trade him. They could get a day 3 pick. Do you know how many picks are made in day 3? 150. So there's a big difference in an early 4th round pick and a late 7th round pick.
They're not getting
Have
a
some
4th
ball
round pick.
and pick around. Don't tell them, they can get a day 3 pick for Derek Barnett. Well, there's a wide berth of day 3 picks. What are you going to get, a 4th or a 7th? And between you and I would say 7th.
I would say 6th.
Maybe good on you. At least you picked around, McMullen. Whole too many reporters said, they can get a day 3 pick. Wow, going out on a limb with that reporting.
I would predict 6th. Maybe you can get a condition on it that if he plays a lot, it can kick up to a 5. I would think that's the ceiling for a potential trade. You try to take advantage. I mean, Mickey Loomis was out there saying, check your pockets when Howie's around. So, and rightfully so, because he's policed him so many times. I always look, and that's why also I bring up some of those NFC North teams, young GMs who make mistakes. Howie takes advantage of those guys. That's what I would think the ceiling is. Conditional 6th. And you've seen it around the league already. The Patriots, the Dolphins traded an offensive lineman, all 6th round picks. I think that's sort of the wheelhouse that what happens at this time of the year. But yeah, you're not getting a 4th rounder. Yeah, forget about that.
No, yeah. And I'll
throw Jalen Hurts in on the trade, you might get a 4th.
No, well, if Jalen Hurts is going to be traded, he's going to be traded to the Cowboys because the Cowboys were actually going to draft him. I'm sure you heard that, Jerry Jones.
That's very Chip Kelly-ish of Jerry Jones. Just wait 2 years, look at who the best player it is. Say, I was going to take that guy.
We were going to take him. If he had fallen to us, just another couple of picks. Yeah, right, Jerry. All right, one other guy I want to get an opinion on a potential trade for the Philadelphia Eagles is Jonathan Taylor, who last week we had one reporter we poked a little fun at here on Birds 365 who said the Eagles were one of the most aggressive pursuers of Jonathan Taylor. I don't know how you would clarify that or define that. I find it very difficult to believe. Today is the supposed deadline date, Tommy. The Colts told them, go out, shop yourself, see what's out there on the trade market, and bring it back to us. Jonathan Taylor's not going to be traded today, is he?
I just talked to him 5 minutes ago. The Eagles are trading 5 first-round picks for him. So,
five.
Oh,
that's a bargain. They could have. I'm sure the Colts
story.
were asking for 6 first-round picks.
That's very Howie-ish to give up first-round picks for running backs.
Yeah, it's listen, Taylor's a terrific player. There's no question about it. But the Eagles are just not going to spend a valuable resource to acquire a player, and then they have to pay him a lot of money, and they don't pay running backs a lot of money. So it doesn't make any sense aside from the fact the Eagles like talented players, and they're an aggressive trader. So people are trying to connect some dots, but I just don't think they're there. It'd be fun to watch him in this offense, but I just don't see the Eagles giving resources for Jonathan Taylor and then having to pay him the money that he would want.
Yeah, well, because I used to be an editor, so you'd have to do these stories. And I talked to Jeff Kerr, who does it. They have to do it at CBS. They always tell him, buy potential targets for insert big name player's name when they're available. And basically what these guys do, they look for, they need a running back, but they don't look at the history of the organization or the philosophy of the organization. So it becomes, the Eagles don't have a great running back, and Jonathan Taylor's a great running back, and they're a Super Bowl contender. So why not the Eagles? They make a lot of trades. Well, because their whole organizational philosophy says, no, we're not doing that. That's why not the Eagles. But hey, when you got to deal with 32 teams, you can't get in the weeds with each individual. But the Eagles, Howie's been around for so long, people should know better. They should know better by this.
They should. Yeah, it's not like this is some secret or it's a guess.
Yeah.
It's obvious that they don't spend big resources on running backs, especially now, this year they let Miles Sanders walk. They could have paid him not that much money and kept him around. Instead, they went with DeAndre Swift, Rashad Penny, and Kenny Gainwell. So the whole running back room is going to make $6.5, $7 million for the year.
Yeah. But you're going to pay Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey like money. I mean, come on, people. Are they still going down that route, Jody?
I've not seen anybody go so far as the Macy guy did last week to call them the most aggressive pursuers. But people are still Taylor's going to be. You say this all the time on the show, John. Who are interested in the player? Team A, Team B, Team C, Team D, and the Eagles. And the Eagles, because that's Howie. Because Howie checks in on everybody, and that's why he's as good a general manager as he is. Do I think it's actually going to come to fruition? He's going to become an Eagle? No chance, no shot, not happening. But since they do make calls, that's why people report that. And the Eagles are in on it too. No,
and Howie's making these calls to gather intelligence.
Yeah.
He's calling Chris Ballard, and he and Chris have known each other now for who knows how many years. You might call Chris, say, hey, what are you looking for? Who's talking to you? And Chris may say, it might be a team from the NFC he's talking to us, or, he might flat out just tell him, we're talking to.
Didn't even have to call him, Tommy. He was there. They were there having a joint practice. Jonathan was there.
And so you're gonna have conversations. You're gonna chat things up, and Howie might just say, hey, what would it take? Because listen, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah.
You sit there and say,
Howie, like a better example I gave was, I guarantee, and when I get to talk to him, I'm going to ask him that. I guarantee he checked in on Trey Lance, not because he wanted him. He just wants to know what the market is. He likes to be informed.
Right.
He likes to be informed. And obviously the Cowboys got him, so he would have been interested in that as well. But he likes to be informed. So he calls about everybody. And when the Colts are in town, some goofball reporter from North Dakota or wherever could say, hey, the Eagles talked to the Colts. Yeah, he talked to Chris Ballard about a bunch of crap. You're 100% right.
They had extensive talks.
Yeah.
Sitting on the sideline talking to each other. They were chatting about the weather and the World Series.
So it's sort of an easy thing to throw out there, and nobody can dispute it because it's true, but it's not real by any stretch of the imagination. And that's not to say Jonathan Taylor's a great football player.
Right.
But it's just not the way the Eagles believe in building a roster.
Number one, it's not the way the NFL is looking at running backs right now. And even more importantly, the Eagles were kind of ahead of the curve in the devaluing of the running backs in the NFL. So Jonathan Dell is not coming here. Tommy, I want to ask about a guy who's probably going out the door. At least my opinion. John mentioned earlier how teams like to cling to those draft picks. If you make a commitment, call the guy's name out on draft. He gets a little bit longer leash. Has the leash run out on Kayvon Wallace? Do you think he's an ex-Eagle and practice squad at best as per 4:00 this afternoon?
Probably. I don't say that with a lot of confidence. I'm not in love with the Justin Evans. I thought played solid in the Colts game. And so that may have been enough. And he's got more upside and more experience than Kayvon. So that may have been enough for him to win that final safety spot. The value with Kayvon is that he's a core special teams player. He's homegrown. He's cheap. You know who he is. You know what he is. You know his work ethic. So there's an argument of keeping him. Justin Evans is a little bit more of a wild card since he's only been here for how many ever months. You haven't really seen him on the field in a real game. You haven't seen him play special teams in a real game. But my guess is that Justin Evans wins that final spot. And then Kayvon goes on the practice squad because it's not that Kayvon's been bad. He just hasn't. You keep waiting for him to really show you something a little bit more. And he did have his best year last year, but it still wasn't anything compelling, right? You didn't look at him and say, like Reed Blankenship passed him in a matter of months.
Like he
where
was standing
Kayvon, it
still.
took years. What's that?
Like he was standing still.
Right. Yeah.
Reed Blankenship went by him.
Listen,
Well, honestly, we didn't even know that. That was like a Denard Wilson thing behind the scenes. So when Reed showed up and played when CJ got hurt, like we were all surprised. I mean, to see Reed Blankenship be in there, and then Jonathan Gannon kind of explained that, you know, behind the scenes, Reed had passed him up. But I would argue with Kayvon. I think they're keeping all 5. I mean, from this perspective, you lost Zach McPherson and Sean Bradley, arguably your 2 best special teams players on a team that was not good on special teams. And Kayvon might have been number 3 on their special teams coverage units. How much can you afford to lose and say, hey, a lot of people criticize Michael Clay. I get why, and say, hey, Michael Clay, go do something. Go do something with this unit. And oh, by the way, you don't have Zach McPherson and Sean Bradley. And in this case, it would be Kayvon Wallace. And people want Eli Ricks over Mekhi Gardner. It's like, what are you giving freaking Michael Clay? What does he get?
I can kind of use your own argument against you and say, well, if those are the best players on a mediocre unit, were they really that good? You know,
good. Yeah.
And so listen, the best special teams player the Eagles had last year was probably Christian Ellis.
Well, it was Christian.
And
I should have mentioned
that was down the stretch, right? That was for the whole season. That was 6 weeks or whatever.
Yeah. I should have mentioned Christian.
And Christian and I will forgive you. This one time, John, don't let it happen again. But you know, he brought real life to the special teams unit when he got on the field. And so they may say those other guys are a little bit more disposable, for lack of a good word, because they weren't good enough that they made the team that much better. I mean, you and I go back to the days of, you know, Ike Reese being a core special teams player and being a great special teamer. You know, you go back
Maragos. I talk about it all the time. They used to have every year they identify 1 or 2 special teamers. And let's be honest,
back in the old days, you had a wide receiver like Damian Douglas.
Yeah,
was a great special teams player for the Eagles, and or Quentin Michael.
Yeah,
you know, so they've had these guys that were not just the best, but they were good enough to make the whole unit. They could build around him, and I agree. Sean Bradley and Zach McPherson, they were good special teams players last year, but they obviously weren't impact players. And
no, they're not Matthew Slater. But
right. So you don't. Your point is absolutely valid that you've got to focus on special teams, but they maybe feel like those guys are more replaceable than we realize, because again they had a limited impact. So. As long as you have a guy like Ellis and you have some other guys that you believe in, Sidney Brown looks like he could be an impact special teams player. Josh Jobe was a good special teams player last year. So there's still some pieces there to work with. But you're right. They could go. It would be tough to go light at linebacker if they do just keep 3 of those guys.
They're going to go light at linebacker.
If they go light there and then just keep the 4 safeties, then they are going to need a running back or a wide receiver, a tight end. Somebody's going to have to step up on a special teams unit. That's another spot where Nolan Smith could help out a lot. But as your point is, John, can we count on him? Is he healthy?
Not with a bad shoulder. Then if Nolan Smith's going to hurt that shoulder further, he's going to hurt it from the line of scrimmage, not on special teams. So specials week 1 is a legit question. John and I have gone back and forth on this a couple times, Tommy. Eli Ricks played very well in the preseason games. Maybe not as well as some of the other guys competing for the cornerback position in practices, be they either joint or just regular practices. But he did flash for me in the preseason games. The Eagles picked him up as an undrafted free agent. He was highly thought of going back to his high school days, but didn't have as booming a career at Alabama. I think he's a guy, if the Eagles don't protect him, he's the kind of guy who will get claimed. And I think all teams try and avoid that as best they can. They take it as a badge of honor that they got the guy and someone else came in and scooped him up. But scooping him up is not good for your organization when he lands with someone else. You think Eli Ricks going to make this 53-man roster?
My guess is that he does, because corner is such a critical position. And we know Bradbury and Slay are not getting any younger, so you'd like to keep those guys, as many young, talented corners as you can. But he's one of those guys who's right on the fringe, because you do, as we're talking about now, you have to say, we got to have a certain amount of players on game day for special teams. And once we fill out all those spots, then we can bring in guys like Ricks, who, he's a guy that's a little bit of a project in the sense he's not going to play this year probably. He would just be a stash for the future kind of guy to develop. So he's a luxury more than a necessity. But because he's a playmaking corner, those are really valuable guys. So that's a guy you'd really like to take a chance on if at all possible.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think Ricks is a litmus test for the Eagles and their true, we know what they say, their true value of the preseason games. Because if it's practice, if it's what they say, I mean, he didn't even get reps in joint practices. So I don't know how he can make the team in the joint practices that they supposedly value, but he made plays in the preseason game, which is, we were talking about Kayvon Wallace. I've heard a lot of people say, Tommy, well, the fact that he played so much in the last 2 preseason games is not a good sign for Kayvon Wallace. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. I don't think it is a good sign. I think it was a clear indication that Justin Evans had passed him, as you mentioned. But with Ricks, it's like, well, he played a lot for obvious reasons in the preseason game and showed up a little bit. It's like, where does that, it's just young player versus veteran. Where does that kind of shake out for you?
Well, you also have the fact that there was a bunch of corners on the team. There weren't a bunch of safeties. So Kayvon Wallace kind of, had a different situation where he had to play a bunch just because there weren't
true
numbers
too.
there. With Ricks, they had a bunch of corners. They obviously wanted to see him in game action. They wanted to get a real feel for him, see what he could do, and had to be encouraged by, again, playmaking ability. He was literally the polar opposite of Keely Ringo.
Oh,
who Keely could.
By the way, they all played better than Ringo. Every single one of them. Ricks, Gardner, Goodrich, every single one of them.
He got in the guy's hip pocket and stayed there, but no clue where the ball was and didn't show good awareness. And Ricks was a guy that would sit there and execute his assignment, but always had a feel for where the ball was and had the 1 pick six and broke up some other passes. It just looked instinctive. When you look at Ringo, it's like size, speed, all the things you can measure. With Ricks, it's about the stuff you can't measure. It's intangibles and instincts and feel, and that knowing when to break and having good ball skills. And those guys are really valuable. So I think he's the guy, like I say, the Eagles are going to want to try to keep him. It's just a question of, you've got to have a certain amount of offensive linemen, a certain amount of defensive linemen, and, on down the line. And if they can fill all those holes and they feel comfortable going heavy corner.
Real quick, I just thought of this because, as you mentioned, it's a stash, which you'd be right, long term. Like, they don't want him to play this year. You don't want anybody to play as a 6th corner, but because you're in trouble. But does Isaiah Rodgers change the thinking? Because he's a stash for down the road, and now you have an extra proven young corner that you're not 100%. As Jody, you could always pick up the app and gamble again. It's not 100%, but pretty good indication he's going to be here. Does that change the philosophy, not only of Ricks, but also Garner and Goodrich in these sort of bubble corners that maybe aren't ready to play right now, but you'd like to keep around? And if you get them through waivers, you can keep them all around anyway. And, Ricks is probably the most likely to be picked up on waivers, but I would still bet against it. That kid, he got $10,000 to sign. Like, everybody had a chance at him back in April, and they're like, I'm not going to $15,000. So I'm not sure he's getting claimed on waivers. It's always a gamble, but does Rodgers being here impact the thought process down the road?
It absolutely could. Rodgers is, you guys were talking about before I came on, the Eagles love to take flyers. And if you can add a guy who's got talent and potential, and there's no, you're not paying him a lot of money, you're not spending a draft pick, why not bring that guy in and see what happens? And so Rodgers is a guy, he's just a lottery ticket. If he pans out for him next year, that's great. If something happens, he gets suspended, doesn't play well. Like this year, they brought in Greedy Williams, the former second-round pick, and they thought, let's see what he does. Let's put him here. He's got some good tape. He's got potential. Didn't play well. He's gone. So that's kind of their version of Greedy Williams for next year. You got a guy who's got some experience. He's got some tape. He's got some potential. We'll see what he does, but you don't count on him. And Ricks is a guy that they've seen up close and personal. They've had their eyes on. And to me, that's the kind of guy that they're going to feel a little differently about than somebody who's kind of an outsider. But yeah, the presence of Rodgers could affect guys like Goodrich and Garner, who are a little bit more. They're not as likely to make the roster, and so you may say we'd like to get one or two of them both on the practice squad. But if they get claimed, well, that's not a huge deal because we do have Rodgers in our back pocket. So that very well could be the thinking there.
All right, Tommy, I'm going to ask you to go a little crystal ball on me and give me some projected opinion for the usage of some players this year. We're all kind of waiting to see if all 5 safeties are going to make the team. I think John is leaning toward yes. I'm leaning toward no. I think Kayvon Wallace is in trouble, and we'll see how it shakes out this afternoon. And then we get to New England, and Sean Desai has to decide how he's going to use them. We don't even know who the other starter is going to be, of course, from Reed Blankenship. Last year, the Eagles' defense, different with Jonathan Gannon and different positional coaches, specifically at linebacker. Still, I'm ticked off that Nakobe Dean only got 32 snaps all last year. Will we actually see a rotation at the safety position? Because it's as undecided as it seems to be, does that mean they will try and use guys in different roles and different calls and down and distance and everything else? Or do you think they want to decide who their other safety is and then play it like they did last year with Epps and CJ? If they were healthy, they were on the field for every single snap. Is that the way safety is going to go this year? Or do you think it's going to change what you decide?
I think it'll be more situational. Terrell Evans is a guy they like in that big nickel role, play him like kind of a pseudo linebacker. And obviously Evans and Blankenship are more of your traditional safety players. Sidney Brown is a guy that can do a variety of things. So they'll try to figure out the way to get Reed Blankenship's the guy they're going to build the unit around because they really like him. The other guys are going to figure out how can we get snaps out of this guy? How can he help us? What can he do well? And they'll give those guys a chance to show what they can do and try to get some out of them. Now, if somebody flat out starts playing really well, then they'll shelve this stuff and they'll settle on the 2 guys. But for now, I think you're going to see them try to be creative and get everybody involved and see if they can get the most out of the group.
I'll end it with you here, Tommy, at Lawlor NFL. Make sure you follow Tommy on X, Eagles Blitz, IGGLES, blitz.com. Yeah, I'm with you with the X. But last year, the Eagles claimed 2 players on waivers. It was Trey Sermon, Ian Book. Ian's already been waived. That will be announced today. Trey likely to be waived, so I wouldn't get too excited. But nonetheless, I'm not going to ask you players, but positions. If the Eagles are going to claim 2 players this year, give me the 2 positions.
I'm going to go with linebacker, I guess, and then wide receiver.
Wide receivers understated.
I like wide receiver.
I like it.
They just really wanted somebody to emerge to give them another outside threat. Devin Allen was hurt. The other guys, Deion Kane, just up and down. Tyree Cleveland did some good things, then got hurt, and nobody just emerged that they could say, all right, because they know the big dogs, and then they've got Zacchaeus, and they've got obviously Quez Watkins. Covey, we still don't know if he's actually going to be much at wide receiver. He's turned into a solid punt returner, but if somebody gets hurt, you just don't have much there. And as God bless Greg Ward, he's been a great part of the organization for a long time, but he's not a guy you want on the field for a Super Bowl contender, right? And so if they see somebody who gets cut that has some potential on the outside, that would be a player. And then linebacker, obviously they could use somebody there for depth, and so that would be the two spots that jump out.
Yeah,
potentially also, if they're still looking for a nose tackle, a backup nose tackle with
Noah Ellis, they are. Yeah,
that could be. And then center, if there is no real backup center for this team right now, I mean, it's Cam Jurgens, but the guys that Josh Andrews is just not a good player. He's a reliable practice player, and that's
he can
probably
snap the ball.
Exactly,
snapper. That's why they brought him in. He snapped great for 2 weeks,
and that makes the difference. So he could make the practice squad just on his ability to snap. Julian Good-Jones, some good things, but he's just not good enough to make the roster. And so they could, at the very least, they'll bring a backup center into the practice squad if somebody's cut that they have interest in, because they need practice reps. And Josh Andrews can help you get the job done, but he's just a limited player. Good guy, but a limited player.
Marcus Mariota is going to be here, right? No, out of the blue, some quarterback gets dropped.
Colt McCoy's out there.
If Colt was healthy, don't laugh, McMullen. They might actually think about it, but because he's not healthy, they're not doing that. Mariota's going to be here. All right, Tommy, great stuff. We always love it when you do join us. Thank you much for doing so. We're going to tap into you plenty during the season. Thanks for helping us before it gets underway.
All right, guys. It's been fun talking to you this summer. Let's look forward to a good year.
Eagles
Thanks,
Blitz.
Tommy.
That's IGGLES Blitz.com. I check it every other day because Tommy posts good stuff. You should check it out. Does a good job. Has been covering the Eagles for a long time. All right, McMullen and McDonald coming back. We'll get to the 53, and then comes the practice squad. And they've got, don't kid yourselves, they're negotiating with guys about the practice squad before they actually cut them today. They've already informed them that, when we get to the deadline, you're not going to be on the 53. But we still love you, and we want you, and we want you to be on the practice squad. You got to be able to sell that if you're Howie Roseman, because there's not a whole hell of a lot of wiggle room as far as money goes. I want to ask Johnny Mack about what he thinks the Eagles practice squad is going to look like. We'll do that next here on Birds 365.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
Score and save at Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
Hey, you got Mac and Mac here on Birds 365. We're going to punch up our pal Dave Zangaro from NBC Sports Philadelphia coming up in a little under 20 minutes from now. But before I ask John about the practice squad, I need to inform my partner here of some breaking news. And this will interest him and a portion of our audience, and some will not only not care, but some will probably be perturbed that I even mention this. Tyrus has retired, Johnny Mac.
Oh, that's a tough blow for the pro wrestling industry.
Will never be the same. Many of you may recognize the name, but not because he was a pro wrestler, other than every time he's on the studio with
He's always on Fox. Yeah.
He's on Fox every day.
Yeah. Well, that's probably why he retired. He's got a good gig, I guess. He was in I forget his name in WWE. It was some goofy name.
How long was he in the WWE? Because
quite a lengthy period of time, actually.
Really, you think so?
He hung around for quite a bit. It's bothering me, so I have to look it up.
Because he's been wrestling about 20 years. He's been around for a long time, but I didn't think he had that wrong. And all the indie shows that you do, you could still call yourself a professional wrestler. Brodus Clay was the stupid name. They give everybody stupid names. That's one of my pet peeves with Vince McMahon. Stupid names he gives people because he wants to own the intellectual property so he can make money. You want to slap a name on a guy and then you own that name.
But they do a terrible job coming up with these names. Brodus Clay. So he started in 2006, ended in 2014. So quite a lengthy period. 2006 to 2014, he was on a WWE roster for 8 years. Yeah. Some of it was developmental to 2006 to 2008, but then the big roster.
Yeah, see, I would have said a year or two.
He was around for quite a bit.
Wow, that surprises me. But he was never a headliner.
No,
he was just a part of the roster kind of guy. But he officially retired. My wife's watching Fox News upstairs. I went to get another cup of coffee, and she said, "Oh, Tyrus."
I thought it was going to be the CM Punk.
No. That hasn't hit the you know what yet. But Tyrus has retired. What was his WWE name again?
Brodus Clay.
Brodus Clay will not be going back. I don't think we have to worry about him getting inducted into the WWE.
No, I don't think you got to worry about that one.
Yeah, he did put years in, but
maybe the Greg Gutfeld Hall of Fame.
That's exactly where he's gonna. If he's gonna be enshrined anywhere, that will be it in the Fox News Late Night Hall of Fame. All right, Johnny Mac practice squad. Cut downs today, 4:00. I think it's 1:00 tomorrow. Every team will be informed what players, if you put a claim in, you need to put a claim in by 1:00 tomorrow. If there's a player you like, you're going to get the cut downs from every team by an hour or so after they have to have them filed with the league. Also, by 5:00, every team's going to have a list of every player that's cut, and you're going to get into meetings and say, well, who do we have interest in? Who we got tape on? Who do we like? What's our roster look like? And you must inform the league that you're going to make a claim by 1:00 tomorrow afternoon. And, oh, by the way, the chance of the Eagles claiming somebody, you mentioned the fact that they claimed 2 guys last year. Less of a chance they're going to claim anyone this year, twofold reasons why. Number one, they got a better roster at the end of training camp.
They had a Super Bowl roster last year, but we didn't know it.
We didn't know it at the time. Exactly. They were coming off a 1-and-out playoff roster, not a Super Bowl roster. This year is an actual Super Bowl roster. I look at the roster as what you did the previous year, not what you will do going forward. And number two, they're they're team 31. The claiming order is done by last year's standings.
Yeah.
The only team that is behind
That's a
them
bigger
is
issue.
the Kansas City
Yeah.
Chiefs.
Yeah.
So if they even put in some claims for some players, there's a good chance somebody else could put a claim in ahead of them. And guess
Sometimes
what? You
it's
don't
good.
get the player.
You know who the Eagles put in a claim for last year?
Then didn't get? Who's that?
Kellen Mond.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Sometimes it works out when you don't get players. Yeah, but Reeds and that
it works, Mr. Procedural Information. They did claim Ian Book.
Yeah.
You're telling me they also claimed Kellen Mond. If they had gotten both players, they would have had to turn around, cut one. You can just claimed.
Yeah.
Can you just say, yeah, never mind. Because you have to have a connected move because everybody's on a 50.
You can say never mind. I do know that.
Okay.
But if you're awarded one, you can say never mind. But when it comes to you're right about pointing out 31st. I mean, that's the bigger deal. You're unlikely to get guys when you're that low on the list, at least guys who are in demand. So that impacts it as well. Plus, last year there was some obvious, I think they went with Sermon just because they liked him. I think people when teams claim players on waivers at this point, I think it's more with younger players. It's more about, and remember, it's everybody up to 4 years, but with really young players, it's about, did they like them in the draft? And they weren't able to get them in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about other stuff because they don't get to see them. It's about they were doing their homework in the draft. They didn't get the player. They liked the player. And I think that's what happened with Trey Sermon. They liked the player from the draft process back when he was drafted. And then with Ian Book, I mean, you remember how bad Reed Sinnett was in the preseason last year as that developmental quarterback. I think that opened the door, and he was a 4th round pick, I believe. And they liked him in the draft. And Nick Sirianni's very close to Tommy Rees, who was his offensive coordinator at Notre Dame. So Tommy gave him the thumbs up. And obviously that didn't work out either. But anyway, I think it has more to do with players they liked in the draft. But yeah, that 31 number is going to really impact the ability to get anybody.
Yeah, I would be surprised if the Eagles ended up claiming and getting. Now, there's a difference between just claiming and getting. I'd be surprised if they claimed and got anyone. I don't think that's going to be a factor this year, whereas last year it was. As John correctly points out, they did get 2 guys who were on the roster all year. There's a good chance. Well, one's already an ex-Eagle. That would be Ian Book, but he could be back as a practice squatter, and we'll find out about Trey Sermon. You don't think there's any chance they're keeping all 5 running backs, do you, Johnny Mac?
No, I don't think Trey's going to make the team, unfortunately. It's always a difficult day. You never like to see anybody get cut, but I mean, you can only keep 53. And I think his path was beating out either Boston Scott or Rashad Penny, and to be that 4th back, and just didn't happen. And again, we talk about that final preseason game, and I do think it varies. It's not a good sign that he got 18 carries, whatever. I think it was 16. That's not a good sign.
No. Especially when the other 3 backs aren't playing at all.
Exactly.
They're all just standing on the sidelines. You're the only one with Kennedy Brooks who's even dressed for the game. Not a good sign.
Not a hard and fast rule, but usually when you play a lot in the final preseason game, not a good sign. Not a good sign.
All right. So they're going to get down to 53. Have you officially made your prediction on the 53?
Oh, yeah. We had to do that Friday after the preseason game.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's been out there for a while.
Who set that date? How long has that been in place?
It's always been that. It's because you want to look. Stuff's going to happen. We know it could be. And again, this is just the initial 53. It doesn't matter after that. Waiver wire pickup, things like that. So, the goal is to get it done after the final preseason game. It's always been that way. And it continues to be that way. It's just the length of the time between the final preseason game and the first regular season game has expanded. So, but it still doesn't change the initial 53. So that's all we're trying to predict.
Gotcha. So the 53 will come down, and then every team in the league will try and fill out its practice squad. And most of your practice squad players are guys who are in your camp all year. They've got a familiarity. Maybe they've already got an apartment. There are a lot of things that can play into it. Money is not one of them. If you're a player who's been in the league for less than 3 years, it's the same salary for everybody. It's a standard per week salary, and there is no, well, he's better than that guy and he plays this possession. No, it's standard salary across the board. If you're a veteran and you're on the practice squad, there's some wiggle room in there. I think about $5,000 a week, $4,000 or $5,000, where you can pay a guy more or less. If you really like a guy, you're going to pay the maximum, right? It's like $1,900.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes but that I think it's more important. The more important change was allowing veterans on the practice squad, because that created a lot more ability to do things strategically for GMs around the league. And so did the injured reserve rules, lightening them up. That gave people a lot more wiggle room. So now it's more difficult to predict the 53 than it used to be, because there's a lot more moving parts. Like you can play the game with vested veterans and say, we're going to bring you back, and you don't have to worry about putting them through waivers. The Eagles already did it. With Fred Johnson, they could do that and say, hey, Fred, we want to give you a 2-year deal. And by the way, I finally found out it was because he had a futures deal, so you can't just extend it. That's why they had to cut him. That was the procedural move. And
do me a favor, because I don't understand it, and our viewers, explain a futures deal.
Excuse me. Futures deal is an off-season deal that, remember, in the off-season when you have the 90-man roster, the top 51 is the rule for the salary cap. You always have to be under the salary cap, but it's only the top 51, and futures deal don't count. They could be top 51, but they don't count. So it's just really a designation of the contract. But evidently you can't just extend those. You have to rip it up and sign to a new contract. So basically they went to Fred Johnson, and obviously, he's thrilled to be getting the 2-year deal,
sure, with
some bonus money and attached to it. So he's like, yeah, I'm fine with it. And you just sit home, he's released and he's back. And so you can do that with every vested veteran. That's why, and the Eagles have done this in the past with Rick Lovato and long snappers. You'll see long snappers across the league. Teams will do that all the time. If they have a veteran long snapper, and most of those guys are veterans, they just cut them and say, hey, we need the spot. You'll be back tomorrow. You'll see that at least a couple times today, I would imagine. And by the way, everyone, well, so-and-so doesn't have a long snapper. They all lose their mind. How can they not have a long snapper? Because they're just saving the spot, manipulating.
Right. So here's where I'm going to go down a road that you probably didn't think I was going to ask you on today. Let's say they do that with Rick Lovato. And let's say Houston Texans do the same thing with their long snapper, that they're looking to save a roster spot and protect the guy in the 53, but they come to a wink and a nod. Yeah, we're bringing you back and we'll make a move thereafter. And the Eagles really like that long snapper. And they can't believe the Texans have released that long snapper. Do they jump in and make a play for that long snapper going, hey, you know where you can make extra money? Playoff money. You're not getting any playoff money with the Texans this year. No, you got a relationship with the coaching staff and you're back there and everything. But you come to the Philadelphia Eagles, we're going to make you our long snapper. We're going to be going back to the Super Bowl again. And then that's extra coin in your pocket with that extra bonus money. Any chance they go there if there's someone else tries to get cute and do the same thing the Eagles try and do?
No. Rick's one of the best long snappers in the league. Former Pro
that
Bowl.
kind of rains on my parade as an idea. He's good. They're not looking to replace him.
If somebody isn't good, it's always a possibility. But when you have a really good one, and Rick's been to the Pro Bowl, probably still top 5, I would say. You're not going to mess
Does
with that.
PFF rank their long snappers?
I don't think they do. I don't know how you would do it, but
come on, PFF ranks everything else. Why the hell can't they?
I'll look in the break. I don't
do
think
they
do.
I would love to know.
I actually asked Rick who the best long snappers are. And he always says Morgan Cox. He's been around forever. He was in Baltimore forever. I forget where he is now. Maybe Tennessee. Andrew, he mentioned Andrew DePaulo, who made the Pro Bowl last year, is really good. So they know. I don't think anybody else knows, like the group. And they're all friends. Sure. It's hilarious.
Do they have long snapper nation get together like tight end?
I don't think they do, but they're all friends. It's an interesting job that nobody talks about until they make a mistake, and the vast majority of them never make a mistake.
Right.
And that's the only time they're talked about.
It's a fraternity of long snappers across the NFL. Johnny Mac's going to see if we can find PFF rankings. Where does Rick Lovato rank in the pantheon of NFL snappers? All right, quickie timeout, come back. Hoping to have Dave Zangaro, NBC Sports Philadelphia, does a good job. Eagle reporting day in and day out, except when he's got to do a studio spot with Barrett Brook. That just looks bad. They even though Barrett is down, Barrett's lost what?
60 pounds? When I saw him, he told me 60.
60's down. Oh my God.
He's probably down more because that was like 2-3 weeks ago. So
he looks good, but it looked even worse when Barrett was heavy, and they'd have him and Dave standing there together on a.
Barrett's a big dude, man.
He's a big dude, and Dave is not. But that's okay. We love Dave. He'll be sitting down to give us his Eagles report. Doesn't matter about height here on Birds 365, just does in the studio when you're standing next to Barrett Brooks. We always like talking football with Dave Zangaro. We're going to do that next here on Birds 365.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
EAGLES, Eagles.
You got Mac and Mac here with Young Birds 365. We're lucky enough to have Zangaro jump in and give us some Eagle insight for the next 20-25 minutes. DG, cut down day. I asked this to Tommy Lawlor. We had him in the first hour. You've been doing this for a while yourself. What's your most memorable cut down day moment? Either a surprise, either a jubilation, guy didn't believe he made the team, he went nuts, whatever. Or a guy threatened someone's life or wife because they were told their services were no longer needed. You got a good cut down day story that pops to mind?
I'm trying to think. You put me on the spot here a little bit.
Yeah, I did. That's my job. That's what I do all the time. I'm always looking to screw you guys.
Yeah, I don't know if anything really comes to mind. So I do I do a series each year where I kind of follow the progress of players. So I've had some cool moments there, like Jordan Mailata when he made the team, even though it was pretty clear they were going to keep him. TJ Edwards as an undrafted guy when he made the team was kind of a cool moment after tracking his progress, but nothing else like crazy comes to mind. It's honestly the worst part about cut day is the next day, because you have guys who think they made the team and they don't. Everyone feels bad for the guys who get cut on cut day. I feel bad for the guys who get cut the following day. Last year, the Eagles had guys who made the team and then they claimed 3 players and then they had to create roster spots.
Who was the third? I remember Sermon and Book. Who was the third?
Janarius Robinson.
Ah, that's right. I thought he was later. That's why.
Maybe I'm wrong, but they brought in 3 claims.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, that's a blow, man. When you think you're on the 53, you're probably celebrating, telling your family, and then bang, they claim somebody on waivers. Let's start with waivers, Dave. If they claim, say 2, we'll say 2. I don't want players, but positions. What do you think most likely they would be looking to fortify?
Well, linebacker. I think they only have 3 that I would keep. Nicholas Morrow, to me, didn't do enough to make the team, but we'll see if they keep him. But that's a position where, even if they keep those 4, I don't particularly like that group. It's why, I think some people said they had decided to keep Ben Van Sumeren on their 53-man roster, which sounds crazy, but they're missing that Sean Bradley special teamer at that position.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you could also get that if you kept a guy like Kyron Johnson who's like more of an edge player, but I think they're missing that type of player at linebacker. And then obviously punter is something we'll be kind of scanning a little bit here to see if there's a possible upgrade out there.
Yeah, the whole punting competition never materialized this offseason, although I did see ties in. I texted
Yeah,
Johnny Mack.
got
I
it
didn't
all.
even realize he got picked up by another team. And then I heard his name. I had the NFL Network. I'm doing a show on CBS, and he's punting on Saturday night. I'm going, oh shoot, I didn't even know he got a job.
Well, the crazy thing is he got a job because Cameron Johnston,
Cam,
the
got
former
hurt.
Eagles punter, got hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cam will be back. Ty won't be there for long. Don't worry
that's
about
what
it.
John said to me. So he's a placeholder till Cam Johnson comes back. He informed me. I was just shocked. I didn't see him on the waiver wire that he got picked up. What kind of percent chance would you put out there that a punter is going to shake loose? The Eagles are going to go, yeah, well, he's better than Aaron Sipos. We got to make this move here. We got to put a claim in. Give me a percentage chance of something like that could happen.
Yeah, I think it's more likely that Sipos is going to be the guy. And whether that's right or wrong, I think Sipos has been okay at moments, and then we've seen some bad moments from him. But I think they trust him a little bit. I think they like him in the field goal operation, which
Holder, big thing, man.
it is. Look, I mean, like Jake Elliott is one of the best kickers in the league, and if not that he couldn't feel comfortable with another holder, but that was a part of this. Like when we did think we're going to have a punter competition, that's something I tried to watch really closely, was to see Sipos versus Zetner as the holder. And even though I didn't think Zetner did anything wrong, the one miss from Elliott we saw was a hold.
It was a good hold too, and it's often a mental thing with the kickers. Like trust,
like kickers have that element to them. So I think the Eagles will be cognizant of that. I don't think that's like the only reason oh, he's a good holder, you got to keep him around. But
no,
I think that factors into it. I'd go like 23%.
I like it. I'd say 70-30. So you're a little bit lower than me, but I do think the holding thing, and for the second reason, Dave, they're banging through 59 yarders with ease. I don't know if you want to mess with that, considering the fact that the Eagles are going to be the team that probably punts the least because their offense is really good. And every time they're plus 50 and it's fourth and manageable, they're going to go for it for the vast majority of the time. So I don't know how much punter means to this team versus some other teams. And they trust Aaron Sipos. I would add that. And the last thing, because I want your thought on this, I think they did a disservice. They made a mistake letting him punt in the Super Bowl. I think it should have been Brett Kern. He hadn't punted in 7-8 weeks, whatever it was. I think it was rusty. I don't think he's that bad as that punt in that Super Bowl.
I kind of agree, but Brett Kern kind of forced their hand too.
I was going to say
it wasn't good, but
we've all forgotten how bad Brett Kern was.
I have not forgotten he was terrible, but he's been punting since the beginning of time. He's Methuselah. He's not going to punt it the wrong direction. It might be 38 yards because he's got nothing left, but he's going to punt it where he's supposed to punt it. That's what I think of Brett Kern.
Yeah, in hindsight, maybe at the time I was like, get anyone other than Brett Kern to punt this football.
That's the way I looked at it too. Yeah. All right, Dave, I was watching this morning, you and Rube chopping it up on NBC Sports Philly, and you certainly talked about the safety position, where we still don't know who the other safety is going to be across from Reed Blankenship. We don't know if the Eagles are going to keep 5 safeties as compared to 4. Is Kayvon Wallace's tenure as an Eagle sitting in abeyance? Here's the one that'll shake out. Well, first of all, we'll find out who's here, who's not. Then we'll find out who's starting and who's not. And then we'll find out who's going to play when, where, how, and why. Because last year, Jonathan Gannon trotted out 2 safeties. That was it. Except for when CJGJ was hurt and Blankenship got a chance. There was no situational substitutions at the safety position. Do you think the new defense coordinator does it differently if these guys are all that close that we don't know who's A, making the team, or B, starting 2 weeks away from game number 1? Does that signify to you that there will be more than just 2 safeties who play this year if they both stay healthy?
Well, I think there will be more than 2 safeties who play, but I don't think that'll come in some sort of like rotation at the position across from Reed. I think they're going to run some 3 safety looks, some big nickel where you have like if Edmonds is on the team, we saw him play a lot of linebacker in training camp, and I look at that linebacker situation, and Zach Cunningham has settled it a little bit in my mind, but yeah, I think there are going to be some moments where that might be the best option they have, is to kind of put one of those safeties in the box and let them play that way. But look, I think eventually Sidney Brown is going to be a starter. It's just a matter of when to me, and when they're going to do it. In a way, it's like I'd be tempted to just pull the Band-Aid off now and kind of live with the ups and downs. And I understand why they might not do that, because there are going to be ups and downs with his play style. But if he's the guy eventually, I feel like, what are we doing wasting our time with Justin Evans? Like, to me, I would rip the Band-Aid off. I get him those reps now because I think long-term he's still their best option. But I got to tell you, watching Justin Evans get all these first-team reps down the stretch,
it's weird, Dave.
It was something I didn't really see coming, and it's not a good sign. Like,
no,
I know they said that it's like it was part of the plan. I'm calling baloney on that. You didn't think we're going to get 3-4 weeks in the training camp, and then let's try this former second-round pick who's been a special teamer in his career. Like, they didn't think that was going to happen. So that gives me pause a little bit. I think they probably are leaning toward Justin Evans at this point, but I would rip the Band-Aid off and play Sidney Brown.
Yeah, I was the one who asked that question, Dave, and I wanted to raise my hand and say shenanigans. I mean, 13 days in, this is the plan. We're on day 13. We're going to take a look at Justin Evans with the first team. It was an absurd sort of spin on things, and uncertainty is never good. I'm with you at that particular position. I would add to your Sidney Brown point. On paper, the easiest part of the schedule is early. Why not get the hiccups out of the way early? You can probably afford a mistake or two and beat some of those teams early on the schedule. And I think it starts week 6. It's Aaron Rodgers. Imagine if you start Justin Evans and you say, all right, it's not working out. And then you're throwing Sidney Brown in week 6 against Aaron.
I mean, they threw in Reed Blankenship against Aaron Rodgers.
That's true. That's true. But Aaron's motivated to prove the Packers wrong. I wouldn't like that plan. But
it seems like that could be what happens here.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, I'm going to ask you this question as if you're on the witness stand. I already pimped you once. I might as well do it again. And if I thought you had notes, I would allow you to refer to your notes if you had them handy, just sitting there right next to you. How well did Kaiser White play in preseason last year? Practice, joint practice, exhibition games, whatever. You got any memory of how well Kaiser White played?
Yeah, I thought he looked pretty good last summer. I thought he earned his role during training camp and during the preseason. I was surprised during the year when he started to struggle that we didn't see any kind of rotation. But like I thought he looked pretty good last summer. So I was not surprised to see him win that job outright. I was surprised when he did start struggling in the middle of the year that there wasn't any kind of rotation or any way for Jonathan Gannon to get snaps for Nakobe Dean.
You figure out the reason why I asked. Last year, you had a 3rd-round draft pick. Sound familiar? Like Mr. Brown at safety, who people were all excited to see, and he never got onto the field. That was just the way the Eagles ran it. They kept their 2 linebackers on the field. They stayed healthy. They played well enough. They never came off the field. Could that happen at safety? That we're all looking at Brown and know he's got a burst that the other guys don't have, but the Eagles do value veterans and guys who have been there and done that, or at least they did the first 2 years of Nick Sirianni's coaching here in town. Do you think that's a possibility again? And Brown just gets the delayed startup cost that they don't want to put a rookie out there and have to go through that.
Possibly. Yeah. I mean, it's possible, but I think they would probably pull the trigger a little quicker on Sidney because, like I mentioned, Kaiser had a pretty good summer last year. they did not rotate at that position last summer. It was his job from the spring on. They rotated a heck of a lot this summer, and Sidney Brown was part of that rotation. He got first team reps, and he worked his way up from the third team. So there was clearly progression with Sidney, and I don't think that spot is as solidified as the other linebacker spot was last year.
Yeah. Agreed there. 4 p.m. Dave today. Derek Barnett, Eagle, yay or nay?
I think he's still going to be an Eagle. I don't think the Eagles are particularly looking to like trade him. I think it would take a decent return, and I don't know who's giving a decent return. I think he would bring back a conditional day 3 pick, like
I said conditional 6th.
Yeah, like a 6 that can turn into a 5, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, something like that.
I'd bet against that.
Yeah, you don't think a team will give that up?
No.
I think the Bears would. I mean, they don't have anybody who could rush the pass.
Derek Barnett is not as bad as his reputation is in this city. Like, I think he's an average rotational.
Jody's one of the guys. He's a good player, but I think it's flummoxed.
When was the last time Derek Barnett made a big play? The Super Bowl. That's now 5 years ago.
I mean, that's not true. He had his best season since then.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I get.
Here's the disconnect, Dave. I think a lot of people say he didn't live up to the billing as the 14th overall pick. No question about that. We can all stipulate that. I think he didn't live up to the billing. But if he were a 3rd or 4th round pick, you'd say, oh, that's a pretty good rotational player. At some point, you got to move on. It works both ways. Jody and I talk about it. TJ Edwards, you brought up TJ. At some point, you got to say, well, he went as undrafted, but he's just a darn good football player. Same thing with the other guy. Well, maybe he didn't live up to the hype. Maybe he got overdrafted, but that doesn't make him a terrible football player. He's a good, solid, rotational end, but that's not what you want with the 14th pick in the draft. So I see both sides, but he's not terrible. He's not terrible.
Here's where I guess we'll part ways. And I agree with you on the whole, you are tied to your draft status for your entire life. After you've been in the league for a while, you are what you are. You are what production you put onto the field. And I think that's both unfair and foolish to do it. Oh, my God, he was such a low pick and he became so good. He was such a high pick and he was such a disappointment. At some point, you do need to move on. But the other thing that is always a legitimate reason to question a guy is salary. And if you're a first-round pick, your salary stays till it ends and it gets higher and higher and higher each year. And Howie Roseman re-signed him to another contract with dead cap money attached to it going forward for years to come. Yeah, that does count. That does matter. He wasn't a 4th-round pick who's playing for the league minimum. He's a guy who's been making good coin all along, and he just doesn't put up any stats.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't.
You guys don't agree. That's fine.
Yeah, but his salary doesn't change the fact that he's been like an average rotational defensive end.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, I mean,
like if you
what does an average rotational defensive end usually make?
I'm not talking about his salary.
Yeah,
I am. And I think that's a very fair way to judge a guy. You don't think it's fair to judge a guy by his salary in a cap league?
Jody, I'm a guest. Let me finish. If you're talking about the player, I understand you're saying salary has an effect, but we're talking about the player on the field. He's an average player. I'm not saying he's good. I'm saying he hasn't lived up to his draft status. Maybe he hasn't lived up to his salary. He's an average player. I'm not saying he's good. He's an NFL player. Yeah. What are we talking about? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. He's I
don't want to be the Derek Barnett guy. Like, I don't want to become the Derek Barnett guy.
I feel the same way. I don't want to be the Derek Barnett guy. But then you hear about, we just got a chance. I don't know if you were in on it that day when Wash talked, but there's such a disconnect about the organization, what they feel about Derek Barnett as a player, and what the fan base and Jody is in that category. not banned, but just doesn't think he's terrible. And I think it's all related to the fact that he's the 14th overall pick and he broke Reggie White's sack records and he didn't live up to the billing.
I think some of it's frustration too with his personal fouls, which is legitimate.
Well, yeah, that part. And Nick Sirianni, by the way, Nick Sirianni has admitted when he got caught saying it's always him. You know, that was one of his mistakes. That was the same Dallas game where he beat Dallas. He said, hey, he was a young goofball coach then. He didn't know what he was doing, learning on the job. He still gets too emotional probably at times. But, yeah, I mean, and we'll move on from Derek because it's such he hasn't lived up to the billing, but he's an NFL player. I think Dave's description is right on. But here's where I'll say the Eagles might want to press pause for this reason, Dave. I'm starting to get concerned about Nolan Smith. We're 5 straight practices. He kind of mentioned the shoulder's an issue. It was before it was an issue. Are you concerned all about Nolan Smith long term?
It's something to think about. He's missed 5 practices now, 12 days now since he's played. He got hurt in that the second preseason game. He missed the third preseason game. Yeah, a little concerned because we talked to him after the second preseason game, and if you go back and listen to that interview, I kept asking him about it because it didn't make sense to me. He said it was precautionary and it was like a stinger. They rubbed some icy hot on it, but then he admitted that it was connected to
the pec,
the
Doug
surgery
Peterson.
For the pec. And I was like, was it scar tissue? I was like, yeah, you could say that. And then he said something about, his shoulders, his baby. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, that was the one that concerned me.
Yeah, look, I don't want to sound any alarms, but I think it's worth noting, and it's certainly worth a question or two to Nick Sirianni, which we haven't had the opportunity to get in front of him in a while. Yeah. But yeah, it's something to think about, and especially when you're talking about, should they trade Derek Barnett? We don't know Nolan Smith's status. Hassan Reddick is going to play, but that's not easy. Yeah. He uses his hands as an edge player. So yeah, I think those are things to think about.
You don't think there's any chance Eagles are making a move at quarterback in the next 24, 48 hours, do you?
At quarterback?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Nor do I. And some people are ready to
run. Like the contract is too prohibitive.
Yeah, Marcus hasn't had a great summer, but I don't know what to think about that, Dave, because early, he was playing shortstop with Brett Toth playing center, so a lot of those reps were sort of ruined because even if you corral the bad snap, it ruins the timing. If he were forced to play, obviously he'd be playing with Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson and A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. He would look a lot better, as every quarterback would. But while I say that, I'd be more comfortable with Gardner Minshew than Marcus Mariota. Is that an overstatement as a backup quarterback?
No. But I don't think it's like I think they're like, you can expect Mariota to look better in a regular season game. And part of the reason is what you said about the guys around him. And the other part, for better or worse, is that his play style, I mean, they clearly told him after that first preseason game, stay in the pocket, dude. Don't get hurt in the preseason, because he was running around like a madman in the first one. And that's his play style. He's going to do that if he ever has to play, which is like, that can help him be more effective, but it also, we've seen him get injured in his career too. So it makes me rethink the whole thought process of having a similar play style to Jalen as the backup. It might just make more sense to have a guy you can just trust to get rid of the football quickly. And they might have
Tanner McKee.
Tanner.
Yeah, baby. But
and the other thing with Tanner is like, yes, he looked very good in the preseason. Excited about Tanner. Think there's a future there. It's vanilla defense
Yes.
in the preseason. If there's a rookie quarterback out there at any point in the regular season, defensive coordinators are gonna get excited about this, and they're gonna disguise a bunch of coverages. They're gonna throw a bunch of blitzes, and he obviously didn't see that in the preseason.
Yeah.
All right, you guys are out there every single day, practice, joint practice. We all get to see the preseason games on TV. Dave, who do you have a better feeling about that you feel good that you are pretty well equipped to be able to lay out ahead of time what they're going to do come opening game against the Patriots? The new offensive coordinator or the new defensive coordinator? Who do you think you've learned more about and how they're going to do their job week one via the preseason, which is just different than a regular season game? Who do you think they got a better grasp on, your DC or your OC?
Yeah, it's tricky because they're not like, it's not apples to apples here, because offensively it's not his scheme. I guess in a way Desai, because I've seen, I had to learn more about him and this defense. I honestly haven't learned a ton about the scheme other than his willingness to try some different things. And I like that. I like seeing the Bradbury reps in the slot. I like seeing some free safety looks. I like seeing some A-gap blitzes from Nolan Smith. Like, I like seeing some of those things. I don't know how much I'll use them, but I think that there's some creativity with the defensive coordinator. The problem I have with Brian Johnson is not his fault. I just don't know exactly what he's going to look like as a play caller, and there's no way for me to know that until week one.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like that's the only question I have about Brian Johnson, and it's one that like he just it can't answer until we get to the season. So I guess by default I'd go Desai, but that's not like Brian Johnson's fault.
I like the way Brian talks about it, part science, part arts. I do think he understands there's a feel to it. Like, I think Shane was really, really good. I think Shane was a really good play caller.
Yeah, let's run the same play 3 times. Like,
yeah.
I love that.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. It's like, I remember one of the funnest things about the XFL was they would mic up the coaches, and I think it was Hal Mummy, and he was like, they were rolling, and he's like, run it again, run it again, run it again. And I'm like, part of the reason that's why coaches don't want to be mic'd up, because they want to make it out to be like it's, advanced, level stuff, and it's not that advanced, but
not rocket science. Is that what you're saying, John? Calling plays is not rocket science.
Yeah, Shane's like that, and Dave, he'll throw a couple F-bombs to make it interesting, but he'll say, if you're going to F and do this, I'm going to F and do this. And I just thought, and then the callback, he would set people up with one look, and then he would go back to it in a big spot and do something else.
All last year, I was calling for a shot play.
Yeah.
On a QB sneak look, and they never gave it to me.
Yeah. Well, you can't have everything, but I had a lot of respect for Shane as a play caller, and that's something none of us are ever going to know. All right. D Zangaro, NBCS. Make sure you follow Dave on X. Does a tremendous job. And I know everybody laughs when I say it. NBC Sports Philadelphia. Ended a cornerback, 2 things. One, what'd you think of the Rodgers signing? Love it. I love it. Out of the box. I think the Eagles went outside the margins again. Might turn into nothing, but it's a pretty good player.
Yeah. Why not?
And then we've talked about this a lot. I'm Team Gardner. I don't want to go Team AJ or Team Devontae, but I'm Team Gardner over Team Ricks, just because I think he was ahead of him throughout the summer. He's a better special teams player. Jody had me looking up special teams. I didn't even realize this on PFF. They do grade Rick Lovato, but I don't. This is for Jody, Dave. Mackay was number 1. He was the number 1 special teams player on the Eagles. And by the way, he had more special team snap than anybody else, 50. Eli Ricks, I had to scroll down 3 pages. He's number 57. This team lost Zach McPherson and Sean Bradley. So Rodgers and then Ricks versus Gardner.
Did they really have 50 special team snaps in the preseason?
Mackay did. He was a
I'm
team
not
high.
talking about Mackay. I'm talking about just the Eagles in general.
Yeah.
They
Well,
went
they're
for it on
down-
4th down. Did they really punt, kick off, cover?
Well,
receive
no,
50 plays?
it's total. It's kickoff return, kickoff coverage, punt return, punt coverage, field goal block. So it's everything. So he was a core 4 guy. He did everything.
Okay.
Okay. Rodgers first. Yeah, why not? There's no downside. You get a decent player and you see what you have next year. I get why the Colts released him, but maybe they shouldn't have. Like, just stick it out. If he understands he did something wrong, he apologizes, you move on, you can have him next year. So, especially a young team like that, I don't know why they released him. And then, look, on merit, you're probably right. Gardner, over the course of a summer, has done more to make the team than Eli Ricks. The problem is he did a lot of it when the other 31 teams weren't watching. So I think that does factor in, and like it, we overblow how many guys are going to get claimed, but I think Eli Ricks is a legitimate guy who could get claimed, and I think that has to factor into the equation when you're putting this roster together. So I would keep, if it comes down to those two, I think the Eagles would opt to keep him and try to sneak Gardner through waivers, and then you can always elevate him if you need that special teams presence in the first few weeks.
Does anybody care about Michael Clay in that building, Dave?
No.
Yeah, I thought the Eagles special team stunk last year. And was surprised that not only Michael Clay was retained, but given a contract extension, but they really don't give him any help. They just, down the list of priorities, Michael, make it work. Michael, here are the guys. Michael, make it work.
Yeah.
They really don't.
They used to care about Dave Bibb. They used to give Dave players. I don't know, man.
Is that
at the end? They weren't anymore, though.
No, that's true.
Then let me ask both you guys. And again, we love it whenever you come on, Dave. Thank you very much. Is that on Sirianni? That he doesn't go to bat for his special teams coach with Howie, who is the creator of all roster spots, that, hey, you got to take care of my guy. You're hanging my special teams guy out to dry with all these moves. Is that on the coach that he's got to fight a little bit more for his guy, Michael Clay, if we all agree that he's not being given the most bullets to play special teams with?
Maybe a little shared blame, but I go back to the end of the Dave Fipp era, still under Doug Peterson, and we were starting to see that. Like,
yeah,
Raymonds were gone, Maragoses, and like all those guys were gone. So I think it predates Sirianni getting here.
That's a good point. That's why we have you on, Dave Zangaro, because you always make good points. Thank you for doing so again today. Appreciate it. We'll get you on during the season, big guy.
All right, take care, guys.
Thanks. Dave Zangaro, NBC Sports Philly, here with us on Birds 365. All right, quickie timeout. Come back. We're running late. McMullen's got a busy day ahead of him. He's got to be on top of everything on cut down day. So we'll come back and put a bow on the show.
If you own a company and you're not producing a podcast, you're missing out. The public consumes messaging when they're ready. Join the professional podcast network of companies and let JAKIB Media Partners put you in the podcast arena. Come to our professional studio, or we'll come to your place of business and professionally produce your company podcast. Call JAKIB Media right now at 267-261-3428. 267-261-3428.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wild wood days.
save at Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. All right, Johnny Mac, know you already submitted your 53-man roster for the contest you're in with all your fellow beat guys. You're worried that Eli Ricks is going to be the guy who's going to beat you this year? The way
I am worried about it, and I'm worried about Michael Clay. He's a nice guy. Nobody cares about Michael Clay. Nobody cares. Now, maybe the Eagles are different. Maybe, like I said, in a lot of ways, it's a litmus test. But I get what everyone's saying. If you ask me, and I already said, Jody, if you ask me who's the most likely to be claimed on waivers, it is Ricks. And maybe that factors into it, because now I still say, and I'm talking about the three guys, I'm adding Mario Goodrich as well, because those are the three in the conversation. I still say it's more likely than not all of them will get through waivers. But obviously we'll never know with one if they keep one, because they'll be on the team. And ultimately, I think they'll have all three. So I don't think it matters that much. It's just a matter of who's on the 53 and who's going to be on the practice squad. I think all three are going to be here. But I think if somebody's going to contribute, it's Mekhi Garner. So, I mean, and it's going to be on special teams, obviously. It's not going to be on as a corner. If they have to play any of them at corner, there's going to be some issues.
Right. But here's the reason why, and I think it's not only part of it, I think it's the driving force of the decision. If you think you're getting the other two through to the practice squad, you should definitely keep the one that you think is most likely to be selected, that's going to be picked up on waivers. If you believe the other two are getting through, well, then it's an easy call. You keep the one guy you think is going to get claimed.
Yeah, but from my perspective, I think all three are getting through. But I'm talking about, 10% versus 5% and maybe 3%. Right. You never know. I mean, Josh Blackwell got claimed last year. I brought up Josh earlier in the show. If you would have told me Josh Blackwell, of all the Eagles cuts, was getting claimed, I would have said, well, you're nuts. He was just cut a week ago. And nobody claimed him. Why are they going to claim him this time? And sure enough, he got claimed. So you never know. I mean, you never know. But I think, everything, another theme of the show, gambling, because of Isaiah Rodgers. Everything's a gamble, but I don't think it's a big gamble on any of them, which has been my point from the start.
Understood. And we'll see if anybody who is actually on the 53, and if either or the other two get claimed once they're out there for the rest of the world to be able to pick and choose. But we won't be talking about who's getting claimed till tomorrow's show, because we got to get down to 53 first and then see whose name actually does get grabbed up by another team, if any. And yeah, I'm on record. I don't think the Eagles are claiming anybody this year. The only way that happens if there's a guy that just absolutely falls off the earth. But if that's the case, he's not getting a 31. I'll stand by the Eagles aren't claiming anybody. I know it's 2 days down the road that we've been talking about here on Birds 365, but unlike last year.
Are they going to trade for anybody? That's, to me, the more...
if they take a 7th rounder for Derek Barnett, and yeah, I'm sorry. I'm the Derek Barnett hater, which makes... both you and
well,
Dave
I've already known that.
Who didn't want any part of being the Derek Barnett defender But yeah, you did.
What number show are we on, Jody? What number?
597.
597. We're creeping up on 600. I think it was show 1 when I knew you didn't like Derek Barnett. So I've known that for many, many shows and many years now. I just think he's more important than people realize, mainly because of Nolan Smith, and I'm legitimately concerned.
Now that's
about
legit.
If
we don't know what Nolan Smith's shoulder is going to be like, then that is legit. That's a legit reason to hold on to him.
Yeah.
But to be truthful with you, no, I'd rather see Patrick Johnson out there. I don't need to see. I don't need to see Derek Barnett take an unnecessary roughness penalty again.
They have Janarius Robinson. They have Patrick Johnson. They have Kyron Johnson. They have Teron Jackson. They're deep. They are very deep.
What'd you just throw out 5 names there?
Yeah, 4
plus
Barnett.
Barnett is 5. Yeah, he'd be 5th for me. I don't know if you were ranking the.
Well, he's the best player of that group, but that other things come into play. Janarius is younger. They're all cheaper. I would say Patrick's the best of that other group. I would say it's Patrick Johnson.
And oh, by the way, how many snaps is Derek Barnett going to play on special teams on Sunday if he's activated?
My guess would be 0.
0. Yeah, that I would factor that in too. You got to.
Well, nobody's factoring special teams.
Well, I'm trying to give Michael Clay a helping hand.
The freaking
get
number
him a
one
defensive end who can actually play some specials, not
the
Derek Barnett.
The freaking number 1 special teams player on the game who played 50 freaking snaps on all 4 units. And no, screw that guy. We don't need him. Nobody cares about Michael Clay. I'm the only one who cares about Michael Clay.
A wise football man once said to me, nobody worries about stopping the run until they have to stop the run.
That's very true.
Nobody cares about special teams, John.
I know.
Nobody.
I know.
Until they run a kickback inside the 10-yard line in the Super Bowl. And then guess what? Everybody forgets again. They think about it in the moment. Go, we screwed up. Yeah. But then they go, nah, never mind. It's still
well, I'm more concerned than usual because of the injuries as well to Zach and Sean. It could get ugly on special teams.
All right, brother. You got a lot of work to do today, but you will be ready to jump back in here with me tomorrow morning, correct?
Yeah, let's plan on it. Let's plan on it. Unless Howie, keeps us all hostage.
Yeah, we'll be looking at the 53 and debating who's going to be added via the practice squad tomorrow. It should be fun. McDonald and McMullen coming back here on Birds 365 and 2 and 2.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.